This is episode 2 of All Today. This is Derek, and with me is Setzer. How are you doing this week, Setzer?
Good. Been a busy week on my end. How about you?
Man, not bad. Work sucks, but otherwise, I've been okay. Well, I'll get started with the things I've been playing here. For the past few weeks, I've been playing Grand Theft Auto games. I know that last week I mentioned how I only play Japanese stuff, so I'm playing the very Japanese Grand Theft Auto franchise. Recently, I finished GTA 4, which was released for the 360 and PS3, I think in 2009 or so. It
Mm.
was one of the first next gen games I felt was kind of truly next gen. The first being Dead Rising, and I remember having kind of mixed thoughts on it because I was a big GTA San Andreas fan, and this one plays a little differently. And going back to it, I believe it's actually the best one. It's got the best story. You get used to the driving after a while. It's a good time. I know that you're not into the Grand Theft Auto, so I won't recommend you play it. But
Yeah, I mean it's we talked a little bit about dad games earlier. To me, Grand Theft Auto is a dad game. My dad, he likes Grand Theft Auto, and I remember like when I was a kid watching him play San Andreas and Vice City especially, and just thinking this is what my dad likes. Uh, like I'm not a huge webcomic guy, but there's a Penny Arcade that I think about a lot. One of the characters says, "So you mean me talking about Star Wars snow speeders is like my dad talking about trout?" And that's kind of been my experience with Grand Theft Auto, where I just, it's such a dad thing to me.
that's so
And
interesting that your dad played Grand Theft Auto. My I think the last game my dad played was Mrs. Pac-Man. Like he does not care at all about video games.
but yeah, my dad is into like Call of Duty, Assassin's Creed, All Out. He's a big Fallout guy. So he has a very different perspective on video games.
Whenever I play games in front of my dad, he's like, "Oh man, graphics have come a long way." He's been saying it every year, every time I've played, like since the GameCube. I've also been playing another Japanese game, Horizon Zero Dawn, um, and also I mentioned last week how I don't like these like super open world games, and we've got the pinnacle open world game here.
Hmm.
But I went in thinking like, well, I need a break before GTA 5, so I'm gonna play Horizon Zero Dawn and see if I like it. And I probably won't. It'll be like 2 hours a game, and then I'll be done. And then I've played like 20 hours since I've said that. I think the game's a lot of fun. It's made me question my biases towards certain things because I didn't play it myself, but I looked at a bunch of pre-release footage where it's like I was like, oh, crafting? No
Hmm.
thanks, bro.
Hmm.
Open world? No. I think it all works together, and it's a lot of fun.
That's funny you say that because I am in the same boat with that game where, it looks cool visually, right?
Yeah.
But crafting, huge turnoff for me
Oh, same.
because
I hate it.
we'll be talking about that a little later in the news section, but it's the sign of like a bloated game, right?
Yeah, it's when you've got like, well, we need to hit that 40-hour mark. We got to put something
Hmm.
in there. Well, the way I look at crafting and Horizon is like, I never really go out of my way for anything. There's just so much crap to pick up on the ground on the way to like my destination that I've never found myself wanting for anything. You do need to like go hunt specific things for like ammo pouches and stuff like that,
Hmm.
but it's really not a hassle. So my biggest fear was immediately like wiped away. If I had to compare it to anything, I would say it's like a more approachable version of The Witcher, because like each fight has different like tactics. You're not if you're going into a battle with like a ton of like big robots, you're gonna get fucked just like in The Witcher, where if you fight multiple crazy monsters, it's not gonna look good for you. But I'm still kicking, so it's made me think like maybe I need to reevaluate my biases about games. I need to actually play them before I go like, this looks like shit. Let's just skip it. Unfortunately, the last time I felt that way was Wolfenstein 2, which was bad. No matter what anyone tells you, that game is not good. It's just it's just a bunch of cool and crazy cutscenes combined with some really mediocre gameplay. But
Yeah, putting a line in the sand there.
yeah, I think anyone that likes Wolfenstein 2 is just liking it because it's politically aligns with them. It should politically align with everybody, but
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
like one of
it's
those
not
things where
exactly a controversial statement,
no,
but
Nazis bad is not a controversial statement,
right,
but
right.
I feel like if you agree politically with something, it will make you more likely to say it's good even if it's not.
Right.
So that's
Yeah,
how
I
I
mean, I
felt
think
about
that
that
there's a
one.
line between, a game that says something you agree with versus you emphatically agreeing with the game, right?
Disco Elysium. That's a game I played a little bit of, and it got a lot of rave reviews. But I feel like it was a little heavy-handed with what it wants the player to feel, so it really hurt my impressions of it. The creators really want you to know they know who Karl Marx is. I'll just put it that way.
Kind of my pet peeve too. I haven't played Disco Elysium, but, even when I generally agree with someone or something, I don't need to be reminded that we're in agreement here, right?
Right. It's not a Marvel movie. I don't need you to be like, "Hey, this good guy is good, and you need to appreciate him."
Do
I
you remember Spoderman?
no.
Well, put on your 3D glasses because he's coming at you.
Oh man, that era of movie that was something else. I remember this trailer of some goose hitting a golf ball to screen. I was like, oh my god, what are we back in the '70s? So what have you been playing?
Two games that I talked about last week, having not had the chance to play, actually went on sale in the Steam Summer Sale this week. So I've been playing a lot of Medieval and Dusk. I'm not all the way through them yet, as tends to be the case when we talk about games. But I'm really enjoying both of these games. Both of them. They're both shooter games. They're both very retro inspired. A Medieval is more of a Hexen type game.
Hmm.
Dusk is more of a Quake type game. From what I've played so far, the praise these games get is not undeserved by any measure. These are some of the best games I've played in a while.
Well, I took your advice and I bought them in the Steam sale myself. So
Hmm.
they're like $20, I believe. I had heard about Dusk before, like where it looks. I haven't played it, but it feels like an old game. Like it feels like it's straight out of the '90s from what I've
Yeah,
seen.
it's very
So
Quake-esque. But yeah, I can't recommend them enough. It's a lot of fun. There's definitely, a little bit of anachronism that adds to the charm as opposed to being a major inconvenience, which again, that's another topic I think we're going to talk about in the news section. But yeah, sublime games, absolutely sublime, real pulse pounders. I know you're not a huge shooter guy. I think, these harken back to a time of less mechanical complexity in shooters and more about movement, more about skill, more about exploration and just having fun. So I definitely recommend them.
yeah, it's embarrassing to say, but I grew up as a console kiddie, so I didn't
Hmm.
play a lot of those classic shooters until much later. But I think the first time I like seriously tried to play Doom was like 2 years ago. The
Yeah.
original Doom, I should say. And I really enjoy that style of shooter. It's kind of a lot of fun. It's maybe I'm just like an old boomer, but I appreciate it. It's just simple.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for the simplicity. I first played Doom back in the 90s when I was not even 10 years old and probably shouldn't have played it. It really makes you think about the different, sort of geological strata of the shooter genre. You have the sort of Doom era, then moving into the Quake era, and then, kind of the Halo era, which
When everything
was
got ruined.
which is kind of comorbid with the Counter Strike era, and then moving into the Call of Duty era, where I think we still kind of are today.
I'm popular game bad so hardcore
Hmm.
back in the day. All my friends were into Halo, but like, bros, come on, Time Splitters too. That's where the real shit's at. You can play as a monkey, bros.
I loved Halo. That's actually ironically a game I played with my dad a lot.
Oh yeah.
We used to play Halo co-op a lot, and I have fond memories to this day. I
I
actually
just
beat Halo 1 in the Master Chief Collection about a month or so ago.
Well, I keep trying to play it and I keep getting lost. I guess I'm too catered to by new games with all their waypoints. So like Halo 1 feels like a complete maze to me at times. I'm like, where the fuck am I supposed to go? I remember back when I first played at the library was like the worst level ever made. It's just going in circles in a maze while you fight the same stupid enemies. I hated it.
Yeah, when I replayed Halo 1, I was dreading getting to the library because I remembered how bad it was. And this time around, normally when I play an older game like that, I can I can kind of look past the flaws. It's not necessarily rose-tinted glasses, but I think I'm a little more merciful about the kind of technical and design limitations they may or may not have been facing back in the day. In this case, the library, it's as bad, if not worse, than you remember it. It's truly rancid. I don't want to say inexcusable, but I really have to question, why this is even in the game. I would have preferred like a little cutscene where Master Chief just runs up and, grabs the index or whatever. I think that's what happens in that level. And just, teleports back to the control room, and that's that. As opposed to this mess of a level.
Well, I am not looking forward to playing whenever I pick up Halo for the billionth time and quit after the third level because I get lost. Or I say I'm going to try to play heroic and then get my ass kicked, even though I did beat Halo 3 on Legendary back in the day, so it's not like I don't have any skill, but I seem to have lost it all in my old age. I'll never forgive EGM for giving Halo such a glowing review because it made me buy an original Xbox. And I played the original Xbox I don't know, an hour. I only played sports games on it because everything else was... I didn't really like the exclusives except for Ninja Gaiden Black and Panzer Dragoon Orta. I tended to stick with the PS2 because I was an idiot, so I don't know. It was $199 I can't get back, so thank you, EGM.
My original Xbox story was I didn't really want one because I was perfectly happy with my GameCube.
Of course.
I remember my dad bought one, and he played a lot of Ninja Gaiden. For reference, I wasn't even 10 years old at the time, and I could not wrap my head around Ninja Gaiden. I could not do it.
That game's hard, man.
Yeah.
It's not for babies.
Yeah. I remember thinking it was really cool when you could decapitate people and stuff like that, but just could not progress. I think I got stuck on the third or fourth level. Yeah, Halo turned that around. Halo made me interested in the Xbox. The other major Xbox, OG Xbox. I almost said Xbox One, but we all know that's not what I'm talking about.
Yes.
The other big killer app was Fable.
Oh God, the ultimate disappointment.
Tried to get your combat multiply even higher.
Well, I remember when we went to go buy Fable the day it came out, and my friend was looking through the strategy guides, this is kind of short. I wonder why that is. I'm oh, don't worry, bro. I'm sure that there's more to it than that. This game's got infinite replayability. Then 10 hours later, I'm well, I'm done with Fable forever. That's fun, I guess.
I rented it from Blockbuster on Xbox and thought, this is kind of not great. And I actually got it, I think, as a Christmas or birthday gift for PC. And I remember playing it and just thinking, yeah, this is
a game.
This is about what I expected based on the Xbox, and being really unimpressed. I think that, this summer I actually played that game on Xbox. My cousin and we actually ended up going back to the PlayStation 1 because we were so uninterested in, what was on the Xbox at the time. And just thinking, damn, Mega Man Legends is so much better than Fable.
Well, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean...
Mega Man Legends delivers on what it advertises. A good Mega Man game.
That Mega Man Legends is my number one game of all time.
Really?
Yep.
Questionable, but I'll go with it. I mean,
well, okay, so here's the preface, right?
Yeah.
When I say that, it's my number one game of all time, or this is my number 5 game of all time, or this is my number 7 or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about the game solely on its own merits, right?
Right.
I'm talking about my experience with the game. Metal Gear Solid 3 is an incredible game, but the reason I consider it, a top 5 game for me is the experience I had playing it with friends, right?
Yeah, that's not a bad way to look at it.
Because I don't think you can ever really divorce your perception of a game from your experience playing it.
For sure.
And I don't think that trying to make an objective comparison between my perception of a game and your perception of a game is worthwhile because it's so wrapped up in that individual experience.
That's completely fair. I mean, that's why I can't look back at Perfect Dark as all bad because I had a lot of fun playing with my friends. Sure,
Exactly.
when I go back to play today, I'm like, my God, this game fucking blows. No offense to the Perfect Dark fans out there, but your game sucks. But I had so much fun with it back in the day that it's hard for me to go like, this game, avoid it. Yeah, so I get what you're saying.
Going over some of my favorite games, there's not one on there that I would say is like a legitimately bad game per se, but there's no game on there that I don't have very fond memories of playing
Are there
and the
any
circumstances
legitimately
around.
bad games that you like?
Well, like we talked about last week, I play a lot of Destiny.
Oh, true.
And I would consider that like on the cusp of being a bad game at this point. I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe next time we record, I'll have gone through my Steam library a bit and seen you
got
know
got yourself a bad game you can discuss that you like.
yeah. I
I
mean,
got
I
one.
think that's a great thing to discuss.
I like Sonic 06.
Yeah.
I think that game's god awful, but I
Mm.
kind of like appreciate how bad it is.
Yeah, I mean, well, I would say that that's more like an ironic like of it.
Oh, I suppose that's true. But I feel
But
like most games that are truly bad are so bad you can't even ironically appreciate it.
yeah, so what I'm thinking is like a game that you admit is a bad game, but you still enjoy playing it and you had a
Okay.
good time with it. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
yeah, yeah. Okay, that's a good thing. We can
Yeah.
write that down and talk about it next time then.
As for, what else I've been playing this week, I also picked up Ruiner in the Steam sale, and this is a game that I've wanted to play for a long time. Have you heard of this?
No.
So it's like a, twin stick shooter that is, very, very, really plays into the grungy cyberpunk aesthetic,
Mhm.
and I'm enjoying it. The presentation is very slick, very stylish game, which is what I expected from the trailers. The controls, though, drive me wild.
Why is that?
So the whole game is more of it's on an isometric perspective, right? So everything is rotated 45 degrees. But at least on PC, you use WASD to move. So when you hit W, it doesn't move you north, it moves you northeast. And when you hit S, it doesn't move you south, it moves you southwest.
That sounds infuriating.
Yeah, and the mouse controls are good. I never feel like I'm having trouble precisely aiming or anything like that, as you would expect for this genre. The button layout is very strange to me. Like when I don't know why, but when I look at a game where you jump or where you dash, I instinctively hit the space bar to dash, right?
Yeah.
In this game it's the right mouse button. So I don't know if I need to rebind the keys or if I just need to adapt, but that's definitely been my biggest complaint so
Y-
far on what is otherwise a very good game.
You need to get good.
Actually, my second complaint about this game, it has a skill tree. I'm more of the opinion, give me the tools to have fun now, and I don't really need RPG elements. I love RPGs. Going back to like some of my favorite games, KOTOR 2, one of my favorite games of all time, but I don't need RPG elements in literally everything.
Well, that's the problem with RPG
And
stuff. They're sprinkled everywhere nowadays. It's like
yeah,
a seasoning. There are a lot of games that have like level up systems, EXP systems, and skill trees and stuff like that that really don't need them.
yeah,
I don't need to play like a shooter and be given like a bunch of paths. It's like give me gun, does it hurt? Yes. If not, give me better gun. Simple.
right.
I don't need like tactical crazy complex RPG elements in my platformers. Just keep it straight. So this week we have kind of a heavy news week. There's a lot to go over, I believe.
Yeah, funny enough, I think we have more items on the docket than we did last week for, E3 week.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Let's get started with something we've already kind of lightly touched on, the Steam sales. Have you picked up anything good other than the two games you mentioned?
I picked up Arx Fatalis and Devil Daggers, which I have not played yet. Oh, Bad North. That's another one. What about you?
Well, I got a bunch of dumb stuff. Well, first let's start with not dumb. I got Doom Eternal because it was $29.99, which I feel is
Hmm.
a good price for it. And I got Mortal Kombat 11, even though I was dismayed about the story DLC costing $39.99, which is insane. I have not mentioned this many places, but I think Mortal Kombat plays like shit. But I love the story because it's so stupid. So I actively enjoy those games, but I do not like how they play at all. So if I'm going to like buy this content, I'm just playing for the story. So
Hmm.
$39.99 for extra story seems excessive.
No
Maybe
kidding.
I'm crazy because I believe it's only like 2 hours of like new content. But what do I know?
You're just an entitled gamer.
For sure. I also got Duke Nukem 3D. It was on sale for like 90 cents. And I also got something called Mugen Souls and Mugen Souls Z, which is Japanese shit that I would not recommend to anyone, but I like it.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
So
Um,
that's the big PC news, always the Steam sale. Console news, the Xbox Series X, right? The next big thing. How about the Series S? They're already planning variants of the consoles before they're even released now.
yeah, I heard about this too. I know the PS5 had. I know the PS5 has like a discless model and a disc-based model. Is this kind of the same thing?
So this is more like let me see if I can get this straight. Xbox One, right?
Mm-hmm.
Xbox One S,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess the S is for like the shitty model.
Yeah, that's what it
So
stands
the
for.
Series S is like the budget Xbox Series X, even
Di-
though Xbox One X was the extreme Xbox One. The Xbox Series X is the normal Xbox Series, and the Series S is the shitty X. Okay, does that? I'm
They might
I'm
need to
losing
work
my
on their.
mind with these Microsoft names.
Yeah, they need to work on their naming conventions. I remember people blame the Wii U failing on the name
Yeah,
the Wii U, and I feel like the
yeah,
Series X is like a way worse name than that. Like
yeah.
I,
I mean, this thing's gonna live or die by Halo Infinite, but that's a story for another time. I think that the whole idea of like console variants, we saw a little bit of it, back in the day with the 360 arcade, and then of course the PS4 Pro versus the series or the One X, pardon, and now it's become before the console's even out, they're planning multiple SKUs. Or not just SKUs, right? Not just like hard drive size SKUs, but we're talking different processor speeds, stuff like that to keep the cost down beyond just the hard drive size, which has, varied for a while now, but now it's almost like a PC. You can
yeah.
play the same games just with shittier graphics.
They want as many people to play these things as possible, but people think these new consoles are going to cost like $600 or 500, 600 USD.
699 US dollars.
Yes, exactly. The old meme of PlayStation 3 coming to reality as an expectation, but that's like that's given our current crazy world with coronavirus and how everyone's like unemployed, that's a lot to ask for a new piece of hardware. So
Yeah.
they want as many people to play the new games and buy new products as possible, and new SKUs will let that happen.
Like I said, consoles live or die by the games, and right now, I think the only game that across PS5 or Xbone 2, the only game that I'm even a little bit intrigued by right now is Halo Infinite. And even then, I haven't played like a brand new Halo game in 10 years. I remember when Halo Reach came out, a lot of my buddies in high school were really, really into that. And I didn't have a 360 or a PS3 for that matter. And I just didn't feel the need to buy one for that game. And I wonder if, Halo Infinite is going to be the system seller for the Series X, the same way Halo CE was the system seller for the OG
Well, what's
Xbox
going
One, not the new Xbox One, but the old Xbox One.
well the what's going against the new consoles is that when something new launches, they try to get everything on the old platforms because that's what everyone has. So like the stuff I'm most excited for, like Yakuza 7, that's going to be on PS4 and Xbox One, or Cyberpunk, also available on
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless you want like a pretty. First of all, if you're playing Cyberpunk on like PS4 and Xbox One, you probably shouldn't. I feel like that's a PC game. If you're gonna play those, you would play on a new console ideally. But if you don't have the money to upgrade, you have options. So why would you?
Yeah, exactly. In the case of Cyberpunk, I you're right that it feels like a PC game. I wouldn't begrudge anyone who just looks at it and says, "Yeah, I'll play this on my PS4. I don't need a PS5. I don't
Well,
need an Xbox Series for this game."
for sure, but I also worry about like how that's going to impact their reactions to it because I played Outer Worlds on PC while my wife played it on the Xbox One X, and I was watching her play, and there were so many load times. I worry that people that play those games are gonna like get a worse experience because they're playing on console, and I'd
Yeah,
rather them not have that.
it's funny you should mention that. I know your wife's a big Dragon Age fan. The first time I played Dragon Age Inquisition, I rented the Xbox 360 version. And I remember it was so muddy and so low resolution that I couldn't read the menu text without like getting off my couch and walking up to the TV.
I annoy
And
my
so,
brother with resolution stuff. Because whenever I play Switch on the TV, I'm like, what? Who put this Game Boy Advanced resolution here on this in 2020? And he gets so annoyed.
well, he's a plebe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, speaking of console variants, 3D Sin. So this is a NES emulator, right?
Hmm.
Where it plays 70 something, I think, games that have been basically prepared specifically for 3D Sin, and it makes them into 3D. You should, I don't know, did you check out the gameplay footage on this?
I did, yes.
Isn't it wild?
It looks. I can't believe it's possible. It feels
Yeah,
like they're practicing some sort of magic.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously it took a whole lot of work on the back end to make this happen, I'm sure, but just the way it looks, there's a shot from one of the old Mega Man games where he's standing on some cogs that are like rotating beneath his feet, and you can see the teeth in the cogs, and I've never seen anything like it. It's so trippy. I noticed, it comes with a VR mode. I cannot imagine playing these games in VR.
That would be insane.
Yeah,
Part of me, I enjoy playing retro games for the retro aesthetic. I like the pixels and stuff, but for I've played Mario and Mario 3 a trillion times by now. It would be kind of nice to re-experience those games with something kind of new.
yeah. I mean, it's a novelty. I
For
don't
sure.
think this will ever be the definitive way to experience, your old NES favorites, but it's definitely cool. There's a lot of cool technology going into it. I wish the team behind it all the best.
Oh yeah, I mean, for whenever they are inevitably shut down by Nintendo, I hope they do well until that point.
Yeah, speaking of retro throwbacks, Crash Bandicoot 4 just got confirmed.
All right, well, I got a hot take about Crash Bandicoot. Crash
Let's hear it.
Bandicoot's bad.
What?
I played the Crash, whatever the remaster was, all three games, beat them all, and I don't think they're good. I think that Crash Bandicoot 3 repeats the same like 4 or 5 level types over and over again until the game ends, and the level design is very varied. Crash 1 gets way too. I know that you could just say get good or whatever, but I don't think it's like a fair difficult.
It's
There's
the
this
Dark Souls of platformers, my
for
friend.
sure. I don't find it very fun. Crash 2 is the only one that I left with any respect for. So I feel like Crash 4 maybe it could be the first good Crash Bandicoot.
See, I feel the opposite. I have a lot of really fond memories playing these games with my cousin when we were little, and again, that's a series that I kind of left by the wayside. I don't think I played any of them after Crash 3. So looking at that trailer definitely brought me back. We'll see if it turns out any good. I think that you have very high expectations for 90s kids platformers.
Did you
Uh,
play the remasters?
I did not. No,
When's the
it's
last
been
time you
literal
played?
decades since I played Crash Bandicoot.
Play those again and tell me how you feel. Because that's how I came in the Crash collection being really excited to play it because I had a lot of fond memories of the Crash games, and I was extremely disappointed the deeper I got. Like, why would my kid self lie to me like this?
Well, see, it's like I said earlier. I think that a lot of your memory of a game and your perception of a game is tied up in the experience you had. To my mind, even when the Crash remasters first came out, I thought, oh, that's fun. I remember those games really fondly, but I don't have much of a desire to play them again. My cousin and I, we live on opposite sides of the country. I won't be replicating that experience. You know what I mean?
That's completely
Um,
fair.
I wouldn't play a platformer just on its own merits. I've never been a huge fan of the genre, especially these days. So, what's the appeal to me, right?
Right.
Maybe if I, had kids or something, I would play Crash Bandicoot with them. But as far as things go now, it's like, oh, that's cool. Those games I played as a kid are remastered, but I don't feel any desire to play them again. We'll say that.
Maybe it's because games have gotten way easier over time. Like going back
Hmm.
to stuff like that feels so complex.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing we'll talk about later.
For sure. So Cyberpunk 2077 got a release date recently, November 19th.
Well, it got a new release date.
Yes, a new
Yeah.
release date. Now I'm not, I alluded to it last week, but it's definitely got delayed, so it would launch with new console launches. So I
Hmm.
would say November 19th, a pretty safe bet for either the PS5 or the Xbox Series X.
One or the other.
Yeah, one of those two will come out November 19th or slightly before. What do you think about it? I know that when I used to bring Cyberpunk up when I was talking about The Witcher or something, you would say like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't know. I'm not convinced that game exists. It's been kind of in development for ever. Are you still looking forward to it?
Yes, I am. I think that a lot of the discourse around this game has sort of devolved into the person in question's personal expectations about, what an open world RPG should be.
Hmm.
Personally, I'm willing to go into the game and just see what it's like and see if I like it or dislike it. I'm a big fan of cyberpunk as a genre. Even if it's fallen out of fashion, I think it's more relevant than ever to our experiences. So aesthetically and thematically, I'm very interested in the game. I'm not a huge open world games guy, so
Me
we'll
neither.
see if I bounce off of that or not. But as far as it being like, oh, the day night cycle has to be this way, or the map has to be a specific size, or I need features like car customization, I need to be able to romance any NPC in the world. I don't really want to come in with those expectations. I typically go into a game thinking, I like this, or I'm interested in this, or I'm not interested in this at all. Go from there, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see. I think that the most interesting thing as far as like, the gameplay goes, because we now have a lot more gameplay footage, right?
Hmm.
And legitimate gameplay footage, not Ubisoft gameplay footage, right? It looks fun. It doesn't look offensive. I think the investigation mode is going to be a major snoozer. I have no interest in that kind of gameplay when I was playing, the Arkham games,
Hmm.
and I don't think Cyberpunk is going to turn me around on that. But I think what's most interesting is the way different press outlets have had totally different impressions. I've seen people say, the driving mechanics are the worst part of the game. I've seen people say the driving mechanics are great and a lot of fun. I've
Right.
seen people say the different intros to your character, the different backstories you can pick from, have been dumbed down and they're not very fun, they're not very good. I've seen people say that if the whole game is like these intros, then it's going to be a masterpiece, right?
Wow,
So I'm
that's
really interested in
diverse.
seeing like, yeah, it's polarizing. So I'm interested in seeing how it's going to shake out in the end.
Well, I'm more interested in polarizing games like that than I am like with universally acclaimed ones. Like if you remember, Death Stranding was it got mixed reception compared to most AAA games, I would say, and that made it pretty interesting because it felt different. And as a result, I think I enjoyed Death Stranding more because it was different.
Yeah,
So
I personally, I don't feel that the critical or popular reception of a game impacts my enjoyment of it,
no,
but I think it's definitely interesting to look at why a game is so polarizing after the fact.
Oh
Right?
no, I'm not saying it impacts my enjoyment
Yeah,
of
yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a sign that like this is something to like it's not like boilerplate AAA stuff.
Speaking of boilerplate AAA, EA claims to be doubling down on Star Wars games. You know, this really threw me for a loop because we talked a little bit about Star Wars games last week, and earlier this week I alluded to KOTOR 2 being one of my favorite games of all time, hands down. They've had this license for how many years now? I mean, we're going on like they've had it for at least 5-6 years, and they've put out like 4 games,
Yeah,
3 games actually, if you don't count that gotcha shit mobile game.
which you don't.
They put out those 2 Battlefront games and then Fallen Order, and it's like now you're doubling down. You got one of the biggest IPs in the world handed to you on a silver platter, and it took you like 6 years to double down on it.
Well, not only that, but their handling of it has been widely criticized until Fallen Order came out. Like I would
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
Battlefront should have been a game that people came out feeling like really happy about because it's what people have wanted for years, and both those games were divisive.
yeah. I mean, Battlefront 2 was like lawmakers were talking about this game, and the Star Wars IP in some regard is now like associated with child gambling laws.
Well, Battlefront 2 changed the world for the better because EA was like, let's get a little too close to the sun here. And they got completely burned. And now everyone's kind of stepping a little bit back as far as the
Yeah,
microtransaction madness goes. It's
yeah,
still not great, but it is better than where we were going.
right. Yeah, I mean, even Star Wars Squadron, they're very vocal about we're not having any loot boxes or microtransactions or DLC. You buy the game, it's like a $40 game.
Yeah.
You pay your $40, you get everything, and that's that. That's the end of the transaction right there. And Fallen Order, pretty much the same boat. I know they've done a little bit of post-release support, but not big DLC, like a $20 or $40 story pack, right?
Right.
So I wonder, what's next for this franchise, at least as far as games goes, because it used to be, for all the Zoomers out there listening, it used to be there were tons of Star Wars games coming out all the time,
You
and
couldn't
that
go a
was
year
like,
without like 2 or 3. It felt
yeah,
like.
I mean that was what was carrying that franchise for a long time between movies or after, the prequels wrapped up. Was you were just getting like a constant stream of games and books,
And you just get
and
experimental stuff too, not just like
yeah,
guaranteed smash hits.
right, right. Or in the '90s, Kyle Katarn was a big hit back in the day, and now you don't know if there's going to be another Star Wars game in the next 2 or 3 years. Allegedly, Respawn's working on a Fallen Order sequel, but how long is that going to take to materialize? After how long Fallen Order itself took to materialize, I think that game, the concept of that game, got passed around to so many different studios. Visceral closed, Amy Hennig left, EA because of how controversial it was. I think eventually that product metamorphosed into Fallen Order, or if it didn't, it's certainly a boulevard of broken dreams, right? Trying to get a Star Wars game out of EA. So how long is this going to take, right?
Well, I believe like part of why the microtransaction menace became a thing was how long it takes them to make these games. They want to recoup some of that cost. And my feeling is I'm tired of people carrying water for these, like making excuses for the developers to like make microtransactions. It's not my responsibility to make sure your company makes a profit.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
design better, like design smarter. I shouldn't have to be charged extra to make up for your inability to budget.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the rhetoric around it has gotten out of control, where you have these drones who are basically ranting about, it's practically murder not to buy DLC because these guys are gonna
These
lose their
starving
jobs,
devs.
end up on the street, and they're gonna starve to death if you don't buy this damn DLC. But if you can't make a good product, it's not my job to subsidize that, right?
No. I'll
So,
buy something if it's interesting to me. So
right,
your job is to make it interesting. I've got
right,
no problems buying DLC if I feel like there's a good value to it, but I'm not going to buy like loot boxes and stuff like that. It's just a waste. Some DLC I do like is Smash Brothers DLC though. they they do a good job of like mixing things up and giving characters you wouldn't expect. Unfortunately, in this case, they announced the new character, which was revealed this week. That the new character in Smash Brothers is called Min Min, which is a character from Arms. They announced a character from Arms, I think like in March or so, and my thought process was that's lame. I think Arms kind of sucks.
See, I don't own a Switch, and I don't have the newest Smash Brothers, so this is totally orthogonal to me. But I do enjoy the sort of hype around the character reveals.
Well, it's always
Um,
interesting. Like you get all these fan bases really excited about
mhm.
who's it gonna be. When Banjo Kazooie got finally revealed, it was like
Oh,
just
that
this
was
great
just
internet moment.
insanity.
Yeah, or at the Game Awards when Joker showed up, like no one
Mhm.
expected that because it's
Mhm.
Persona 5 is a PlayStation 4 exclusive, still is. So
Yeah.
it's cool when a new character gets announced. So it's a little disappointing when it's a first party character that's from a franchise that relatively few people care about compared to most Nintendo franchises.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not on board for like when the fake like enthusiasm comes out whenever Waluigi gets confirmed. Like he's got a lot of ironic fans, and I just can't stand them being happy.
Right. Yeah, they should suffer.
They should.
Um,
They deserve no rights.
I I think the only fighter at this point that would get me excited for Smash, I'll inevitably end up with a Switch because my wife wants Animal Crossing, but the only fighter announcement that would get me excited is Doom Guy coming to Smash. I think that would be hilarious.
I think everyone's kind of on board with that
Um,
one. I actually think it's
but
inevitable at this point.
yeah,
There's been so much chatter around it.
as far as Smash characters goes, I they've already got Mega Man, so I don't
They
need
got you
any
sorted.
more fighters. Yeah, they got my boy,
Uh,
so I don't need any additional
you
fighters.
get greedy, ask for Proto Man or
Ooh.
Zero
Yeah, I need bass if I'm gonna
oh,
enjoy the game.
base. You gotta have treble, otherwise it's not it's not accurate.
He
It's
can be one of those support trophies. Well, that's it for new releases. How about anti-releases, aka deaths? Mixer shall
was it
be
ever
mourned.
alive to begin with?
It was alive in the sense Frankenstein was alive.
Oh sure.
Microsoft hoisted the lightning rod and animated something. I know people streamed to Mixer. I think I went to Mixer once to see what it was because I didn't even realize it was like a streaming service. And I thought, well, this is a lot like Twitch. Then I went back to watching whatever I was watching on Twitch.
Well,
Um,
I feel like Twitch desperately needed a competitor, so I was
for
happy
sure.
for that.
Yeah, I mean,
Without Mixer there, they're kind of the only like no matter what YouTube tries to pretend, they're not a
mhm,
competitor.
mhm.
So Twitch is kind of alone.
Well, I'll say that, I don't watch Twitch regularly.
Oh, me neither.
I don't watch streamers or, personalities.
Yeah, I can't get into that stuff. I if
Yeah,
I'm playing a game, I prefer to play it. If I'm watching something,
yeah.
I don't know. It takes away the experience.
Yeah, I'm not a big Twitch guy. I just don't get the appeal. I don't get the novelty of it. If I
Well, I
want
find
to play a game, I play the game, like you said. If I want to learn more about the game, I'd rather watch a pre-recorded video that is informative.
oh same or read like an article or something.
Mhm.
I find it a lot more interesting than some guy trying to crack jokes over an 80-hour RPG while he's grinding.
The only time I really looked at a stream to learn more about a game, it's always ended up like finding either a major personality who's just screwing around and has one eye on the chat, or it's some obscure streamer who clearly has no clue what they're doing. And
Right.
they're like running in circles, they're complaining about how hard the game is to figure out. So I never really got the appeal. Like, wouldn't you rather just play the damn game?
Right. It's I think it's a generational thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
I know that my little brother, he knows more about like streamers and stuff. He like will actively watch streams with his buddies, but I really don't get the appeal. It doesn't register with me.
no, I don't think it's a good way to experience a game. Like when people form their opinions about a game just by watching someone play it, I don't think that's authentic.
Right, right.
Because your experience could be different. Like the streamer could just be purposely goofing around trying to make it like a weird experience, but game could be nothing like that.
Going back to, your personal experience of a game, I don't think another person's experience would be compatible with how I would organically play that game. Well, speaking of not playing a game, Final Fantasy XV's multiplayer has officially been excised from that game. They released a patch that basically said all online functions have been removed.
Oh, great.
Good luck and goodbye. Something that hasn't gotten a lot of attention lately.
There's a reason for that. No one knew that Final Fantasy 15 had multiplayer.
Exactly. But
Comrades
it used
existed.
to be a lot more. Yeah, Comrades. That's what it was called. Didn't you have to buy that separate too?
You did, and I actually do own it.
How
but
is it?
I never played it.
Oh, well.
So I can't now. Too late.
Yeah, but I remember it used to be a lot more controversial when multiplayer games got shut down, and now
Expected?
I think it's more expected. Yeah, that's a good word for it. It's almost like,
Well, shit. I remember when Chrome Hounds for the 360 got shut down, and that was a huge deal at the time. Like, things just didn't shut down. Or like Halo 2 when the original Xbox servers shut down. It was up for like a decade, and then it shut, and it was a big news story.
Yeah.
And now AAA games, like, they're kind of like, all right, well, you played this one for a couple of years. We're moving on. We're shutting down.
Yeah. I think that in the case of Final Fantasy 15 Comrades expansion DLC for purchase, nobody ever gave a shit about this, I don't think.
No,
I'm sure
no
it
one
had
did.
like devoted fans. It never really caught on, and it never really became popular, and I wonder, what it's got to be like to work so hard on a multiplayer game like that and just see the servers are totally dead. And
It's got to be frustrating because I'm sure the people that made it weren't doing it on their own free will. Some suit at Square Enix was probably like, "Oh, we need some multiplayer shit.
Yup, tack it on.
Tack it on,
Sell
get that in there."
Yeah.
Like, please, sir, no one plays this Final Fantasy game for the multiplayer. Don't care. Get crunching.
Yep, got to check that box. I mean, especially in the case of 15, where, the game's development is like legendarily troubled and elongated. Was Comrades a cash-in, or was it,
I think they were trying to recoup some costs.
Exactly.
Because versus 13 probably cost them a crazy amount of money before it was canceled and then uncanceled or whatever the hell was going on there. It wasn't cheap.
I was talking about this with my wife. We were talking about Final Fantasy 15 a while back. Imagine being the child of a developer on this game, and you are now old enough to read and write and, go to public school, and your entire life has been your father or your mother is working nights crunching on Final Fantasy 15, and that's literally the only life you know.
And it's a game that, like, it's so split with whether people like it or not. It's not even a masterpiece. Like, I enjoy Final Fantasy 15, but I cannot blame anyone for seeing that game and going, this game sucks. It's not Final Fantasy. So it's a bummer.
I played it, and I got to the Venetian city. I can't remember what it was called. Alticia, something like that.
It's got Leviathan in it. I know what you're talking about.
And I remember thinking, like, oh man, this is that city that they showed off in all the pre-release trailers where Noctis fights Leviathan. We're coming up on that. And just thinking, this is such a slog, and playing through that QuickTime event is not worth it, and dropping that game like a hot potato.
Yeah, it felt like they were chasing so many trends with Final Fantasy 15. Like, they were like, well, open world games are all the hotness. We got to make that. And Skyrim's all the hotness, so we need a ton of quests.
I think that there were things I liked about Final Fantasy 15, like the characters.
Yeah.
That being said, I think that its open world approach is nothing like Skyrim.
I know, but I that's just how I feel like they approached it. They wanted.
Yeah. I think Skyrim in that time was
it wasn't. It had been
buzzword.
Well, no, it wasn't. Yeah, it was. Skyrim was kind of old by the time FF15 came out, but I'm saying, like, during development, it probably influenced things.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
Final Fantasy 13 2, a completely different game, I felt was inspired by trends at the time too, where they just like threw things in. Like, all right, they want fans want multiple endings, let's put them in, even if they're
mhm,
kind of shitty. They
mhm,
want like an open world, fine, let's give it to them. It kind of sucks, but it's there.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I definitely think that the influence of Skyrim in terms of leading developers to make every RPG an open world RPG, even if it shouldn't be, can't be overstated.
well, everything
Even
needs.
today,
Yeah, yeah.
but I
Well,
think that most open world RPGs are much more similar to Far Cry than they are Skyrim. Bethesda games in general rely on a lot of systemic dynamism,
hmm
whereas a lot of imitators of Skyrim, I think Dragon Age Inquisition is a big example of this, took this idea of having markers on a map, and that's the furthest their open world goes. There's no systems underlying it. It's just like a theme park MMO, right?
yeah.
And I think Final Fantasy 15 definitely hews closer to the theme park model than the systemic model.
Well, all I know about Skyrim is that it's the third Elder Scrolls game.
It's the fifth.
No, I know that. That's a joke, you idiot. I'm probably the only person alive who hasn't played more than an hour or two of Skyrim. So I believe Skyrim has influenced games to the point where everybody feels your game needs to be like 70 hours long to get your fill out of it, which brings us to like AAA game length.
Yeah, yeah.
They're talking about like how going forward they might need to adjust things so everything's not 60 hours. They kind of shorten things up so they can get quicker releases out. How do you feel about that?
I think that it's probably one of the most complex issues in video games. I'm not a video game developer. I I work in technology. I've worked with global consumer products. I've worked with software products. I have not worked with video games, so we'll get that out of the way right now. So I'm not going to pretend to know the economics of the video game business.
hmm
That being said, the article is specifically about Sean Layden, the former PlayStation boss, talking about how, you know, every console generation, the budget for a game, a AAA game, basically doubles in order to meet the graphical expectations of consumers as those evolve.
hmm
And the price of a game has not increased in probably 10 years, 15
Yeah.
years. And so it's really begging the question, can we spend hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of 5, 6 years to create these 80-hour games when consumers are really starting to get tired of the filler content, the
Yeah.
crafting, the open world crap, the cruft that has become so popular in the wake of Skyrim. And can we maybe cut that budget down, cut the time required to make the game down to a healthy 2, 3 years, and deliver a solid 20, 30, 40 hour game that says what it needs to say? I've been in that camp for a long time. We talked a little bit last week about expectations and opinions that would have gotten laughed at 10 years ago and vice versa. And I think that this is definitely one. I think people are starting to move away from this idea of evaluating a game's worth based entirely on how much time you spent in it.
Well, that's depending on what circle of the internet you go to.
Yeah.
Because my brother, because he hates me, I guess, he sends me Reddit screen caps of people complaining about there's nothing to do after you spent 200 hours in Animal Crossing. And I'm thinking, well, you spent 200 hours in Animal Crossing. That's
Yeah.
you kind of got your money's worth at that point, I'd say.
I don't think money's worth based on time is a good metric either.
It's
I
bad
think that
because it implies that quantity equals quality, which is not true.
right, right, exactly. I evaluate the game based on how much I enjoyed the experience versus how much I paid for it. Dusk, very short game. Ruiner, very short game from what I understand, right? But I'm having an absolute blast with these games, and even though I haven't beaten them yet, I still think I got my money's worth, regardless of the time I'm going to continue to expend on them, right?
For sure. But I think like a game only needs to be as long as I don't know, as if you're feeling like you have to push content in to meet a certain length, you're doing it
Mm-hmm.
wrong. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a game can just be 12 hours. It's just not, I
Yeah.
mean, if it's good, it doesn't matter. Like Devil May Cry 5, I think is 12 hours long, but it's highly replayable. You replay so you can get better ranks and stuff. Like that's a game that
And
doesn't need to be 40, for instance.
yeah, and in the case of Devil May Cry, the game itself is very fun.
Yeah.
Just playing the game is fun. We touched on this a little bit with Horizon Zero Dawn, which you said you've been playing. When I look at that game, it really reminds me of games like Dragon Age Inquisition or Final Fantasy 15, where so much of my time is spent doing things that I don't enjoy.
Right.
And Destiny is not an open world game, but it's definitely getting into that territory where, Bungie expects you to grind dozens of hours to get a gun, right? And to
Well,
have
yeah,
that
you need
fun.
to cut the fat out.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's what this is really about is regardless of the financial problems with AAA development, is it really a good goal in and of itself to just make the game as long as possible, right?
Yeah.
And whether that's financially sustainable, that may be the suit's big concern, but I think as consumers, you should really look at it as, am I having fun with this game? Not how long I'm playing this game.
And, I also believe they could look at like alternate methods. Like instead of going for hyper realistic graphics, you go for art styles, which are probably cheaper to make, but I think are more impactful to me anyway. Because
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the big AAA games, they all look really great, and they're all like realistic looking, but at a point, they all kind of look the same. They all kind of blend
Hmm.
together. But if you have like a different art style, it might not only be cheaper, but it might help you stand out in the market.
Yeah, I will say that Ruiner, very stylish game, does not look realistic. Dusk, Medieval, Gloomwood, Ultrakill, they all have a very distinct retro style that is eye grabbing and has really, made me get into the spirit of the game in a way that I think making a hyper realistic, photorealistic even nowadays game wouldn't. And I'm going to be the first guy to say, go with a eye-catching art style. I think that if Wind Waker didn't look the way it looks, it would have been probably forgotten by now. But instead,
Probably.
it's become a huge focal point in the discussion of game art style in the same way that Skyrim's become a focal point for discussion of open worlds.
Well, you're right. I mean, just look at how people regard Wind Waker, and then compare it to how people regard Twilight Princess,
Hmm.
which is it's. I think it's almost night and day. I think both games are pretty good, but like Wind Waker sticks out. It's just different.
Yeah, and meanwhile, I think Twilight Princess has been mostly forgotten. If it weren't for Midna, I think that everything else about that game has become just totally forgotten.
It did get a Wii U re-release at least.
Oh
And
boy, a Wii U re-release?
yeah. Well, when I replayed Twilight Princess, I felt it doesn't get enough credit. It's really good. It's just I can easily see why people forget about it.
Yeah, it's
It's
not a bad game.
it's not particularly innovative. It's just another Zelda. It's like
Yeah.
Ocarina of Time 3.
Are you
Um,
implying an Ocarina of Time 2?
well, Majora's Mask is considered that by some,
By some.
but they're wrong. But
Amen.
Majora's Mask is better than Ocarina of Time. That's my official standpoint. That's the popular hot gamer take that I also subscribe to. So
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes because, in the article, they basically allude to the idea that either we can trim the fat on these games or we can increase the unit price on
trim the
games.
fat.
Yeah, yeah.
No
Because
one
I
wants to
think
pay
that,
$79 for
yeah,
games.
I mean, especially these days with the economic meltdown, I think that $70, $80 for a game is going to be pricing people out.
Yeah, you get to the point where people are like, well, I have a hobby. I can either
Yeah,
keep doing this or find a new hobby. And $80, you're at the point. Where,
yeah, yeah. I mean, in we're already talking about releasing cheap versions of consoles just so people can buy the console.
well, if you
Uh,
want to get real cynical about it, a cheap version of a game is the non-deluxe edition of it because the
right.
deluxe edition has the DLC included. So
And, they jack up that price a little extra just to make some gravy on the side, but if people can't afford the console, do you really think they're going to be able to buy more expensive games again and again and again and work up a library, right? So speaking of overstuffed, I've noticed lately we're kind of getting into the idea of we're stuffing other franchises into our game, right?
Yeah.
Other IPs are crossing over.
So back to Smash Brothers.
Yeah, Smash is probably the premier example these days. But just in the past week, Smite announced that they're doing Avatar: The Last Airbender crossover. For Honor and Samurai Showdown are doing crossovers. And these are hardly the first ones in the past year or so.
The Avatar one's kind of confusing to me because I know that it came back on Netflix recently, but I feel like Avatar hasn't been relevant for a while. I know that they're making like a live action Netflix.
Oof.
Yeah, I know. I'm not excited for that. But to be honest with you, it makes me more interested in Smite because I really like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't really give a shit about Korra, but she's there too.
Have you played Smite?
I have not. It's in a MOBA, so that's why I haven't played it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was about to say, knowing what I know about your tastes, I think Smite would not be up your alley. Avatar or not.
Well, I'm too dumb for MOBAs. Like, my brain doesn't work quite in the right way, so that's a
Or
pass the
MOBA's
roof
too
for
dumb
me.
for you.
But, I mean, it's cool that they're doing it. I assume that it makes other people go, oh, neat. I'll check out this game. But, as I said, MOBA, no thanks.
Yeah. I distinctly remember, so Monster Hunter, they do a lot of crossovers with Witcher and Final Fantasy. And in the run-up to Anthem, I remember them talking about Monster Hunter Anthem crossover. Because, of course, at the time, Anthem was going to be the next big thing, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
I heard about it all the time.
shooting them down, saying, it would like violate the creative sanctity of their world to have Monster Hunter monsters appear in their game because they just don't belong in our game.
Oh, it's like how Marvel wouldn't let their characters be beaten up in preview footage for Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite.
Right. And, I think that crossovers for me are hit or miss. I realize that they're intended to, drum up some cross-audience appeal and get people into the game who maybe are more familiar with this other IP.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I kind of look at it as a sign of desperation. Right?
I think it depends on the franchise or the crossover happening. Like, for instance, in Smash Brothers, I think obviously it makes sense. It's a crossover franchise.
Yeah.
But, like, for things like Monster Hunter, I think if it's thematically appropriate, it's okay. Like, when Monster Hunter first came out on PS4, I think they had a Horizon Zero Dawn crossover, which I think thematically makes sense with Monster Hunter.
Yeah, it's a game about monsters, right?
Right.
Robot monsters.
But for, like, let's say they got a Metal Gear Solid crossover, or you said Assassin's Creed, I don't really think that fits in. So it feels
Speaking
cheap.
of Assassin's Creed, Final Fantasy 15 had that Assassin's Creed crossover.
Yeah, it did. Metal Gear Solid 4 had a Assassin's Creed costume as a crossover, so it's been going on a while.
I don't know. I think that it's really weird to see the hype around crossovers outside of Smash.
It's synergy, bro.
Yeah, I mean, Smash I appreciate vicariously when a funny character gets added to a fighting game.
Right.
But something like Final Fantasy 15 Assassin's Creed, I look at that the same way I look at Final Fantasy 15 Cup Noodle, where it's like
just
glorified shilling.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. They just want you to experience a different product, and it's like, well, you're playing this game. Here, check out this other game that has nothing to do with it.
For.
You could pay for it. They're not really related at all. They play completely different genres, and they're not thematically similar. But you like video games. You like this one too.
I mean, you like Avatar. You want to buy skins in Smite, right?
Come on, bro. Don't you want to be the last Airbender?
Yeah, you're a true fan, aren't you?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they got to make sense for it to be a crossover, and very few of them feel that way. They don't feel organic to me. So I can't get excited for them either.
I'm definitely a big fan of goofy crossovers like Smash or Monster Hunter, where Geralt is like grumbling about how much he hates this damn monster.
Right, yeah. That one, again, Geralt and Witcher and Monster Hunter crossing over is fine because it's thematically appropriate.
And it's funny.
Yes.
But, something where it's just, don't you want to... And in Monster Hunter's case, those crossovers were free updates, by the way.
Yeah, but
Um,
a lot of the time they're not free.
right. It's, it just comes off as pandering
Oh,
or
you know what? I
begging.
agree with you on the funny thing, by the way. Like if they
Yeah.
put like Cooking Mama in like a Call of Duty game, that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. Or what if Cooking Mama was the next Smash Fighter, right?
Yeah, that's just goof. It's stupid, but
Yeah.
it's if you're gonna advertise to me, do it in a fun way.
Right.
I don't need to see AAA team with AAA. You mentioned during this like crossover thing, you mentioned Anthem,
Mhm.
and that brings me to a good point. I don't know if you remember this, but when on the pre-release for Anthem, the press was like talking about how amazing it looked and how
Mhm.
and how it was going to be like the game of a generation. And every bit of footage I saw, I was like, "What are you? Are we watching different games?" And so when it launched and everyone hated it, and the critics were like surprised at it being a flop, I was like, "Were you guys missing the footage we were all
Yeah.
seeing?"
Yeah.
This was a big flop coming away from like a mile away. You could see it coming.
Yeah, I got Anthem for free. It's part of a promotion for my graphics card that I had just purchased. I remember playing it and I beat the story, and after that I thought even free is too much for this. Like this game is so terrible, legitimately bad, that there is no excuse for sinking time, let alone money.
Well, yeah, it's strange. So it makes you think of like the disparity between like users and critics. Like, what are we looking at? It's I
Hmm.
think
Yeah.
the players kind of knew that Anthem was going to be a flop. They saw it coming.
Yeah.
Or like Mass Effect Andromeda. Who
Hmm.
didn't see that one coming like a mile away? Everything about the game looked
I don't
terrible.
know. See, you mentioned Andromeda, but I don't know. In both games' case, they were very, very nebulous before release, and they were kind of just pushed out like, okay, here you go, right? But in Andromeda's case, the press was kind of like, I don't know,
I don't know. I saw a lot of like glowing praise for the franchise in general.
yeah.
People were kind of afraid to
Well,
like
that's my
poop
point
on it.
is, Andromeda was kind of riding the Mass Effect hype and, the past accolades, whereas Anthem was released into a post-Andromeda world where people were very skeptical of BioWare and still are, and it was a new IP with no clear-cut, pedigree, right?
Hmm.
So I think that the Andromeda disappointment was like, I expected Mass Effect, and you like shat on my face, right?
Yeah.
And the game itself is like, it's got pretty graphics and it's got explosions, and when you're cutting a trailer or you're cutting a gameplay trailer, there are parts of that game where you can sell it, right?
Right.
Anthem, on the other hand, is part of the Schluter genre with Destiny, which has always been controversial to say the least, and Division, which, I've also played Division 1 and got Division 2 free with my CPU. That genre has always been kind of, it's never really hit its stride, and no one has ever been able to, capitalize on the promise of that genre.
Right.
And so Anthem was kind of like, there's no part of that game that you can make a supercut and make it look impressive. The graphics are pretty enough, I guess, in places, but when you're like looking at that game, when you're seeing gameplay of that game, it does not look fun. It doesn't look fun at all.
No, it doesn't.
And there's nothing you can like cut from that game to trick you into thinking it's fun. And I think that people were much more prepped to hate Anthem, regardless of its quality, just because BioWare had become, the subject of so much ire,
Hmm.
and the genre of Anthem had become, such a meme at that point that the game itself being total shit, just irredeemable dog shit, was the icing on top. A lot of people worked really hard on that game, I'm sure. If you read the behind the scenes press exposés on it, a lot of people, their lives were more or less ruined trying to meet expectations for this game, and management yanked them around and destroyed that.
That's what it seems
possibility.
like.
But like you said earlier, the end product was shit, and it's not the consumer's job to like it or pay for it.
But what do you think like causes a difference in perception between like people in the media and the player?
We kind of talked about this last week. I think that a lot of journalists are again writing for their peers. I said this line last week, not to say all game journals are the same. There's definitely not a lot of different opinions on games in there, and they tend to review very similar games by very similar standards, and they have a very clinical experience with the game.
Well, I value diversity in opinion when I'm looking at critics. Like,
Right.
if they're
Right.
all sounding the same, who am I supposed to listen to? You know?
When a consumer plays a game, they had to pay for it most of the time. They're playing it at their own pace, on their own couch, and there's no expectation that I need to have a complex opinion about this game. I can either like it or I can hate it.
True.
More than that, consumers don't get buttered up with trips to, exotic destinations to play this game, like, Total War, Britannia or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That Total War game that came out a couple years ago. They flew a bunch of influencers out to a castle in Britain and had like a medieval feast in this castle, and then they take you to a room full of PCs where you can play the game, right?
Yeah, I find that sort of thing scummy.
Yeah, and consumers have no equivalent to that whatsoever.
But I will say the free game thing does not bother me. I mean,
It doesn't bother me, but it definitely leads you to have a different experience playing, and thus a
for
different
sure. Well, yeah,
perception.
because you didn't like monetarily spend $60 for a game you hate or whatever.
Yeah, there's less riding on a game when you get it for free, and
But
that
I will
definitely
say
impacts
like,
your view on it.
but I will say time is not free. So
Yeah.
I kind of balance it out like that.
My perspective is, like you said, time isn't free, but consumers are paying money and time to play the game. Reviewers are just paying in time.
That's
And
fair.
even then, we talked about the Crash Bandicoot remasters earlier. As those prove, you don't even have to beat the game to review it
No,
on
you
major
don't.
websites like IGN. You can just say, I didn't like the part of the game I played. I didn't beat it, but I didn't like it.
Well, I do have a
7
problem
out
with
of
that. I think if you're reviewing something, you should at least beat it.
Right.
And ideally beat it on normal mode, which
Yeah.
which is
I mean,
asking a
even
lot
if you have
sometimes.
to kick it down to easy mode or whatever, even if you need a friend to beat a part for you, again, I compared game reviews to movie reviews last week. Imagine if a reviewer just said, "Yeah, I watched the first half of the movie, and it's okay."
It would be
wouldn't be taken
inexcusable.
seriously.
Yeah. It would be inexcusable. Then I touched briefly on skill. What do you think about like reviewers and their abilities to play? Like, does it bother you if they're bad?
Yeah, I think that there are reviewers who are good at games.
Hmm.
There are reviewers who are bad at games but pretend they're good at games. And there are reviewers who just straight up admit, I'm bad at the game, but here's my opinion. And I think that that's still valuable, But more and more, you do see cases of extreme incompetence. Like this guy, I think it was GameSpot, who did their Battle for Bikini Bottom HD review.
Hmm.
And the guy's complaining that, you basically have to hit a switch from a distance, but the animation to hit that switch moves you forward. And you have to stand on a button while you do it. So any sane adult who's watching him try to do this in his little video review is saying, why not just stand behind the button and then do the animation?
Right.
But he just can't figure it out. And you watch him do it like 4 or 5 times, and he just can't figure it out.
It is
And you're
maddening.
thinking, like, yeah, and he's getting mad about it.
Well, that's a fault of the reviewer and not the game.
Right. Especially in the case of remasters and re-releases. I talked a little bit about this last week, where people have an expectation that the game will be not the way they remembered it, but like a modern game, regardless of the graphics, or perhaps because the graphics, trick them into thinking that way. But clearly, things have changed.
They do. Well, they're less handholdy.
Yeah. I sent you a video about the AI of the Creatures series.
Hmm.
And that is an incredibly complex game where, each creature in the game has this complicated system of, a simulated brain with different lobes and neurons that connect between the lobes. And you don't see games like that anymore. Sim City, it hasn't had a release since like 2013, I want to say. And even that was panned for, dumbing
What a
down the
release.
series. Yeah, yeah. And you don't see a lot of big name, complex games. We touched on this a little bit with the differences between Skyrim and Inquisition, where Skyrim has a lot going on under the hood, and Bethesda definitely dumbed it down a lot. But there's a lot going on systemically to make that game convincing, right? When you're running through the world. Versus a game like Inquisition where you're moving through a static environment between checkpoints, right? You don't see a lot of complexity anymore. Even, later Bethesda games like Fallout 4 and especially Fallout 76 have removed a lot of that systemic complexity from a game that in 2011 was considered neutered and simplified, right?
Yeah.
And now you just don't even see attempts at that.
Well, that's part of like trying to branch out to as wide an audience as you can. As gaming has gotten more popular, they've had to change things so more people can access them, which is both good and bad. I think it's good for people that are less skilled. They can kind of experience more things. But for people that have been playing games for a long time, everything kind of just nothing feels like it's a challenge anymore unless you ramp it up to like the hardest difficulty or something like that.
We talked about last week how Dark Souls has kind of become the gold standard for hard video games, right?
Yeah.
But if you've played Dark Souls 1, and you played Dark Souls 2, and you played Bloodborne, and you played Dark Souls 3, when you go into Sekiro, you know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And that game is pretty tough, even for a Souls-like veteran, but you're generally you've got a head start.
Yeah.
And Dark Souls 3 suffered from this more because Sekiro mixes up the mechanics more than Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne did. But in Dark Souls 3, you can play that game with your eyes closed if you've played previous Dark Souls games. The rest of the industry has kind of become that way where if you've played enough Call of Duty, the new Call of Duty is not different to you. It may be novel to someone who's picking it up for the first time, which, in all fairness, that's great for them. But if you've played enough Halo, how drastically different is Halo Infinite going to be?
Right.
If you've played enough of these, of open world mush, the next iteration isn't really getting you excited. And I think that, removing that complexity has kind of contributed to that feeling. I think that a lot of games have a lot of systemic complexity in the sense that did you play Andromeda?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so in that game, if you want to get a new gun, you don't just find it in the world like in, say, Dusk, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to run around getting research ingredients, and then you find like the blueprint recipe. Then you research that blueprint. Then you need to get more ingredients to actually craft it. Then you need to get more ingredients to upgrade it and, get mods for it, right? Mm-hmm. But the end result is the same. You just have a gun, and it's not significantly more compelling than just finding that gun on the ground. And in that sense, I think games have become more complex in the ways they waste your time. But the core gameplay has not evolved, right?
Right.
Graphics have evolved, time wasters have evolved, but the way you interact with the game and the way you experience the game and the factors you have to take into account have become very, very simple and very, very samey.
Definitely, definitely with AAA stuff.
Yeah, we're talking
a lot
about
of it's the same. Yeah. If you go to the indies, it's a little more experimental. Obviously, I kind of like view user ability as a handy tool, just because I feel like a lot of people that are maybe still reading game reviews may not be good either. So having someone that also sucks is helpful, because it's like, oh, well, this will be what it's like for me. I won't be able to stand on the button either. So maybe Battle for Bikini Bottom isn't for me.
One of the game reviewers that I respect the most, Noah Caldwell-Gervais. He has a really good YouTube channel where he gives some of the most insightful analyses of games I've ever seen. You know, he's very honest that he played a lot more RPGs and he is not the best at, you know, action games. And if you watch his Horizon Zero Dawn review, he really liked the game, but you can tell, like, some parts of the gameplay he's really struggling with. And in that case, you know, he specifically said, I didn't have consoles growing up, so playing with the controller is still really new to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, very much aligns with a perspective that a lot of people share, and that's really valuable.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to have diversity of skill sets. You shouldn't just have, like, uber gamers reviewing games. You need, like, shitters, too.
Yeah, and there are also games that, you know, he's really good at. And I think that everyone is that way to some degree.
Oh, for sure.
Where, you know, there are genres that I am terrible at. Like Twitch shooters like Call of Duty, I can't stand them. I think everyone is that way to some degree, where there are genres you're better at and genres you're worse at. I'm very bad at low TTK shooters like Call of Duty or Titanfall, but I love Titanfall too. You know, it's one of the best games I've played in the past few years, even if I'm not good at it.
Right.
You know, I think the difference is I'm not paid to give my opinion. I beat the game, and I did play the game, right? And I didn't struggle with it to such a point that I consider the difficulty to be a sticking point.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, we saw a lot of discussion around that with Sekiro, where people were saying it needs an easy mode. It doesn't respect its players without an easy mode.
I don't like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think at that point, the difficulty is part of the game, diegetically.
Right. You're compromising it to make it
Yeah.
more appealing to a more number of people.
Right.
Like, you're not gonna, like, if you, like, read a book that has complicated language, are you gonna dumb it down so it's easier to grasp? I don't think so. If it's got complicated ideas, you embrace it. And I feel like hard games, like, they're hard for a reason. So, like, if the developer wants to add an easy mode because that's just what they want to do, that's fine. But I feel like once the product's out, if they just didn't want one for a reason, it should just stay gone. Yeah,
I mean, in Sekiro's case, you know, the difficulty is part of the game, not only from a design standpoint, where the developers clearly want you to experience the game in this way, and they have spent a lot of time tuning that experience. It's also part of the game thematically, where you are a lone outsider or someone who's otherwise very much set upon. You have to struggle to survive in the game, your character, right?
Right.
And if that's part of the developer's creative vision, then that's their prerogative. Likewise, if they want to put it in an easy mode, like you said, that's their prerogative.
Right.
I think the moral outrage about it is just beyond the pale.
Well, it's for people that want everyone to know how good of a person they are, for being inclusive or whatever. I don't think every game needs to be beatable, like, by everybody. It just dumbs down the medium. You'd have, like, NES games you couldn't beat, and that was fine. They were good games, you just couldn't take them. So I don't agree with the idea that everything needs to be beatable by everybody. I think that is silly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the developer's artistic vision, and you can take it or leave it. You don't see people arguing that this specific movie needs to be dumbed down.
Right.
Or this specific book needs to be dumbed down.
People mocked folks that said Parasite needed a dub. It's compromising the integrity of the game or the movie or whatever. Just let the developer do what they want to do.
Yeah. Amen.
So we're a little long on the tubes this week, so I think we're going to call it. You can reach us on Twitter at allofthedaypod, or you can reach us via email at allsthedaypodcast@gmail.com. But until then, see you next time. This is Derek.
And I'm Setzer.
All right, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Arrivederci.